Junkie Media would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people who for centuries have cared for and nurtured the Redfern area of Sydney, where we've recorded this podcast. It's an honour to work and create every day on unceded Gadigal land here in Redfern, the birthplace of the First Nations civil rights movement in Australia.
This episode of Little Things has been made possible thanks to the Adobe Max Creativity Conference. Search Adobe Max online to join for free right now.
This has been an incredible chat. I don't know how we're going to, this might just have to be a 2-hour long podcast release. We normally do 45 minutes.
Yeah,
but
a two-parter. It's a hard world out there for the girls. So, you got to do what you got to do.
Yep. From optimizing how we sleep to literally everything we do when we're awake, the way that we care for ourselves has become both a daily practice and a cultural phenomenon. I'm Alice Griffin, and this is Little Things, where we navigate the noise of the self-care economy. This episode, I'm with Lexi Rodgers, a writer, creative, athlete, and the subject of the documentary series Hoops, which in Lexi's own words, brought visibility to transgender and gender diverse people in high-performance sport. Elite sport, as we know, is a highly politicized space where gender diverse athletes and transgender women in particular are often discouraged or outright excluded. Today, we're chatting on cultivating resilience in the face of overwhelming scrutiny and backlash, the structural change needed to combat toxic positivity, and of course, why her little things are actually kinda the big things. Hi, Lexi.
Hello.
How'd I go?
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I got
well
it
done.
in one, perhaps.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to start by asking you about your writing, which has been a big part of your life.
I think I've always had a real pull towards just creativity in general. So playing sports growing up was like really my priority. And then on the side, my mum in particular always made a real point to have us learn a musical instrument or do something else on the side. And so at school, I really liked English. I liked reading. I liked writing essays a lot. I know that sounds really nerdy and dorky, but so be it. And so then...
You've come to the right place anyway.
Well,
we're here
yeah,
for all that.
yeah.
So we're like, no, that's not nerdy and dorky. That's cool.
And so, yeah, it definitely started out with music as that outlet. And I would have been writing lyrics or poetry, and I probably wouldn't have even thought about it as like, yeah, I'm going to sit down and write. It was just a process of creating and expressing myself. And then over the years, and as I've gotten older, that's turned more and more into, I can articulate myself really well on a page, and I really like telling stories that way. So yeah, a lot of music to start off with, and then a lot more writing as I got older.
I like to ask writers what they like to read. So what do you like to read?
I really like to read like sad girl fiction.
Fun.
That's probably my go-to.
What happens in sad girl fiction?
It is, I guess, these characters that you follow are representations of modern women. So women who have careers or potentially are creatives and are generally disenfranchised with the world, as we all tend to be sometimes. And their stories and their inner monologues and their journeys kind of reflect an internalized feminine rage. So there's a lot of elements of repressed femininity or repressed sexuality, and then feminine rage, like I said. So these characters are often not that likable because so much of what they're saying is quite cynical or at times vengeful or almost they're just intrusive thoughts. But I find them to be a really interesting reflection of what it means to be a woman in the 21st century.
Do you have like a favorite sad girl main character?
Yeah, I think it's probably recency bias more than anything. I think the main character in Boy Parts by Eliza Clark.
Oh, I'm so annoyed because I love Eliza Clark, but
Yeah.
I've not read that book. I've read Penance.
It's fantastic.
Yeah?
It's fantastic. It's so on the nose, and I actually hated it for the first half of it. But the kind of the feminine rage angle and how it uncovers itself and recontextualizes the first half once you get over a certain point. I loved that character a lot. Yeah.
I don't think this is a sad girl character, but maybe like an angry, like feminine rage character is obviously the chick from Gone Girl.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
I love that. And I think that was such a seminal moment in allowing women to be angry. Actually, something I read on TikTok around resilience was like, someone was like, I'm resilient out of spite. I've been fucked over so many times and like now I'm just like owning my female rage and I'm resilient because like I'm not going to let anyone fucking stop me. And I'm like, baller. And I feel like that's a bit of Gone Girl energy.
Yeah, find your own motivation. I mean, it's a hard world out there for the girls. So, you know, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Feminine rage is a great thing.
Yeah, we love, we endorse. I want to talk to you about resilience, and I want to read you the definition of resilience and then my definition of resilience, and then I kind of want to get yours. Okay, so resilience is defined as the psychological quality that allows some people to be knocked down by the adversities of life and come back at least as strong as before. I feel like, okay, good. Yeah. And then I found this definition, which I thought was kind of cute. Resilience is grit plus forgiveness. And I saw this on a TikTok. And it's like forgiveness for yourself, for others, and for the world putting you in shitty positions.
That's a pretty good way of putting it, to be honest.
Yeah, I like the idea of like, part of the difference, I think what we were talking about before with perseverance versus resilience is like resilience includes letting go of stuff and accepting stuff.
Yeah, true. I definitely find it to be much more an exercise in acceptance.
Yeah.
Than anything else.
Versus like, I must just continue on.
Yeah, this idea, and I feel like if you say the word resilient, ideas of like bulletproof, strong, confident person comes to mind, and that's just not what it is.
Yeah.
And we all can acknowledge that that's not what it is, but
what is it to you?
I think it's just an ability to cope and keep your head above water, and there's a vast array of emotions that can emerge in what that looks like, but yeah, I think it is just an ability to deal with shit when life throws it at you.
And like maybe pivot after that shit gets thrown at you, or like make active choices versus continue on.
Yeah, not allowing yourself to be beholden to the bad things that are happening. It's okay to like stew in them a little.
Would you say that you're resilient?
No, probably not. If I was
Lexi, we framed this whole episode around your resilience style.
Like, yes and no.
Yeah.
I am a really emotional person. I'm a really sensitive person. And so at quite a surface level, like, do I fit the bill of what we think of resilience as? Maybe not, because when I'm given sad news and when I am faced with disappointment, I do react with sadness and anger and emotion, and that's very human, but it certainly doesn't meet the expectation of resilience that I think a lot of people have. Underneath the surface, yes, I think I'm a resilient person. I think there's been a lot of experiences I've gone through in childhood and through adolescence, and then in adulthood and through a transition and through this kind of unique adversity in the basketball space. There's a lot of times where I've had to cop crap and try and accept it and try and deal with the emotions that come out of it, but then move on and work on what I want to work on and keep moving onward and upward.
But I don't think you're saying like you feel that maybe you're a bit reactive emotionally in different situations at times, but I think that's also just being human.
Well, yeah, exactly. So if I'm given bad news about something, I might burst into tears after the phone call ends. Like, that's just who I am, but other people might not, and then let it's, you know, more of something they'll sit with quietly for some time. And I think from the outside looking in, the reaction that's probably not quite as extreme, I mean, it's not an extreme reaction, but the reaction that's not quite as emotional probably looks more resilient in terms of how we think about it generally. But both are resilience. Yeah. And it is more about how you respond in action or inaction to those situations that defines resilience for me. So I think in that sense, yeah, I am resilient.
Yeah, I'm going to challenge you on that because I was looking into it and people often think resilience is like this in terms of your emotional, like is a steady line in terms of how your emotions are meant to be. But the real definition of resilience is knowing that you will have dips, but then responding and to put yourself back to a better emotional and psychologically safe or happy place, and continuing on versus not experiencing any of the dips.
Yeah, for sure. It's such a individual and subjective kind of thing that I think people would need to navigate on their own. So if you are an emotional person, then maybe if you understand that and accept that you will have emotional times and you will have dips and you will have peaks as well as troughs, it's being comfortable with that and it's being able to navigate how you respond to it and how you do sort of like moving forward, and when things aren't quite as emotional, how you work through those challenges.
Talk to me about routine. That's a big part of your coping and resilience kind of strategy.
Yeah, and that's something that has probably become more apparent because of those really challenging times. It's not a conscious thing where I'll like schedule everything in. I notoriously do not have a calendar or a schedule.
Great.
So it's more just the sort of everyday behaviors or weekly behaviors that I'll kind of often innately do and become quite attached to that give me a sense of comfort with myself. And so thankfully, as an athlete, it's quite easy to set up workouts and to set up a routine that works for you in a physical performance sense. And when I was going through really challenging times, maintaining that routine is something that actually gave me a bit of an escape and gave me a lot of separation from the bureaucratic and emotional and really difficult side of it. And it's ironic because the practice of playing and the development as a player was all in service of getting to a point where I could play, and it was very separate from, becoming eligible as that player. But it's also feeding into the desire to want to get there and then the disappointment when I'm not getting there. And so that back and forth was sort of an interesting thing to navigate because it was the routine that was keeping me sane and keeping me afloat. And it was also the thing that gave me so much hope and the passion to keep working towards what was making me need to have the escape and the getaway.
Yeah.
But even day to day now, I find it's the parts of my routine and it's the things that I do regularly that make me feel really grounded and make me understand who I am as a person a lot better. And even if it's something like making a coffee in the morning or having a shower in the evening or something, how I'm feeling and responding to the things that are different during the day, that's when I kind of reflect on those moments and think about how I want to respond and how I feel about them.
Yeah.
And so it's the routine that I feel gives me those opportunities.
I also think it's about giving your brain some parameters and guidelines and just being like, it's not a choice. Like, we are going to do this because this is just what we do. Whether we feel good or we don't feel good, we're going to get up and do X, Y, Z because that's just a habit that we formed. Yeah, I find that really helpful.
Yeah, it's I think using the word habit is almost probably more reflective of how I experience the routine that I'm talking about. And it's funny as well. I'm sure a lot of people who are athletes can relate to, like, you set yourself the standard with the routine of being an athlete and the work that goes into being an athlete. And a lot of the time that is the thing that you set as a non-negotiable because it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. But there's also a lot of other parts of being a person generally that we don't set as the non-negotiable, which might be taking the time for yourself and having the small things, the little things that
shout out.
Yeah, shout out. That give you the time that is probably going to serve you really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about how much resilience is, like how much you can learn around resilience from playing sport when you're young. Did you have that experience? I mean, like failing, trying again, falling,
Yeah, it was a lot of potent examples of those kinds of things. It's funny because I was quite an anxious kid. And so at tryouts, especially when I was younger and starting to come into competitive or representative sports that you have to try out for, I would be really overcome with anxiety and quite often cry beforehand. I think more at the social element, like what if people think I'm weird? What if I'm, and to a degree performance, like what if I'm not good enough and people then judge me for that? So I found that side of it really challenging when I was around 10, 11, 12. And then once I was settled in those environments, it still was an anxious kid, but probably wasn't quite as overwhelmed by those moments of pressure and those moments of expectation. But for sure, I mean, spending the better part of 10 years working my way up and developing as an athlete, and as you get more and more competitive and as you climb the ranks more and more, you do get accustomed to being rejected or criticized or yelled at. I don't know about these days, but I was yelled at a lot in the 2010s. And I suppose there's a kind of resilience that it instills within you, but there's a point at which that resilience also becomes suppression. Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
I think I was, like I said, like quite anxious and always quite worried about what people expected of me. And so as an athlete, that looked like a fear of disappointment, like a fear of disappointing people with how I would perform or what they expected of me in my role as a player. And even if I was not a feature of the team, if I was coming off the bench, I felt a real sense of responsibility to play my role as best as I could. And if I didn't meet that standard that I felt was being set by other people, I would be really fearful of the consequence, even though it's sport, it's for fun. There's not necessarily a consequence in the moment. So I was really beholden to that sense of fear and that sense of shame. And I'm sure there's a lot of intersecting parts to that were coinciding with how I felt about my gender at the time as well, and just how I was relating to masculinity overall. So yeah, there's an interesting point where that culture that I was experiencing in sports as a young man, and especially when I was coming into young adulthood as well, I think I felt that to be a real point of pressure and setting an expectation that I don't think I was ever going to meet, which did fuel a lot of hard work and probably did end up pushing me to become a really successful athlete at that age, with volleyball in particular. But it's also something that's really toxic and took a long time to kind of break down.
I think kind of what we're talking about is like resilience versus perseverance, and like the difference between the two things. Resilience is the ability to recover or adapt positively after adversity, like a tree bending in the wind and springing back. Lovely. And then perseverance is a consistent effort to pursue a goal over time, like a climber repeatedly tackling a difficult mountain. It sounds like there's mixtures of both within your story of sport.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing them read out separately.
Yeah.
Because they kind of melt into the same thing a lot of the time, but they are very distinct from each other. So I suppose perseverance in that sense is always prevalent, because when you're an athlete and when you're working towards a goal, the goal just keeps going up and up and up and up until you reach the highest level. And I never reached that highest of high levels. So the perseverance side of it was always quite potent. Like I could always keep persevering through because I wasn't reaching the goal that I wanted to reach. And I was never devastated by not reaching that goal, but I was motivated to reach it.
And you had to suppress stuff in order to continue to persevere, perhaps.
There was certainly in the world of competitive sports, I made conscious decisions in my mind to suppress who I felt I was as a person and my gender dysphoria, because I felt that if I expressed it, then I would be probably sacrificing the sport side of myself, which was still important to me. at the time. Yeah. And that's not to say that was rational. That was really irrational. But that was just my state of mind at the time. I was just really ashamed of that person and, knowing that I felt gender dysphoria and wanted to be a young girl instead of a young boy. And so, yeah, I didn't feel comfortable sharing that.
How did you get to the place where you became comfortable to share that?
It's an interesting question because I almost feel bad in the sense that I only felt comfortable coming out after I'd had a really horrible kick a horse while it's down kind of year. So I had a relationship breakdown. I had some troubles at work. My mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and I had to move back to the country where I didn't mind living, but I didn't want to live. And so everything was just falling apart a bit. And I felt a bit like, I've suppressed this part of me and who I want to be as a woman because I didn't want to sacrifice all of the things I'd built in my life as a young man. And I felt as though those two worlds were really, really separate. There's almost like a before and after as to like how you think about yourself and how you think your life is going to be after you decide to transition. That's just completely wrong. So again, like it's quite an irrational thought of like, if I transition, then I'm going to be sacrificing all of these things that I've built up and that these communities that I've worked to create and different things like that. And things do change and there are sacrifices that are made, but not to the degree that I thought they would be. But the comfort or the decision to transition sadly came out of a place where I felt I didn't have much to lose. So I thought, things can't get that much worse. So what would I really be sacrificing if things go horribly if I transition? That said, the second I started engaging with that side of myself again and I committed, like once I started experimenting with my gender, within 2 weeks I was like, yeah, I know what this is. I've always known what this is. And I committed to transitioning. And that was an incredibly joyful experience and euphoric and really undermined all of those thoughts of fear, shame, suppression that I'd had for the decade prior.
I'd like to talk about the documentary, where it came from, what journey it covered.
So the documentary is a project that picked up sort of on the second half of my overall journey with returning to basketball. And it is technically a season 2, like a follow-up to a series that Hannah and Eliza had worked on a couple years earlier about transgender people in sports, more so from a community side of things and what the general context looks like in terms of the policies and the cultures and how society feels about transgender people in community sports. So they were really interested in telling a story about an individual and looking into the human side of what an experience like that is, and preferably something at an elite level, which is far more contentious, as we know, and really politicized and could probably use with a bit of deconstruction in a humanizing kind of way. So that just coincided with the year that I'd had after coming back to basketball myself. So I came back to basketball at the end of 2022 and have always been on court, have always done trainings and workouts. And I just like being on the court and I like the method of it. And I like going and shooting and doing different drills and just, I don't know, it's a good way to keep fit. So I went to a work event to play and was spotted or scouted by the person that was managing the courts. And they were like, you're tall, obviously, and you're quite skilled. Like, did you play growing up? It's obvious that you've played. And I was like, yeah, I spent 8-9 years at Kilsyth out east and played rep basketball and, keep up my skills and keep playing and whatever. And they asked if I'd be interested in playing organised basketball, which was something I did think I had to give up, sports generally, and playing it because it's a charged environment and it's quite scary to return to. But because I was sort of invited and encouraged to meet with a coach and see what it looked like just training and being part of a team, that was all I needed to be pushed back into the space. And as soon as I was back on the court with people, it was a really empowering feeling and a really happy feeling. You know, on the court and playing sports is where I feel like I belong a lot of the time. It's where I was all throughout my teenage years. It's where I am in my spare time a lot of the time. So it was really rewarding straight away, and there wasn't any judgment, and there may have been apprehension, but as soon as I met people and as soon as I shared the game with them, it put all of our minds at ease, and it took away a lot of the ignorance that we all had about the situation. I mean, when I first met with the coach and we were talking about attending a training, the pair of us who were eager to do it were quite ignorant of how people will respond. Like, I thought people were going to be much more apprehensive or really negative towards me, but they weren't at all. It was very, very normal very quickly. So that was how I came back to basketball, and I integrated into that NBL1 team quite naturally, quite well. I spent the whole preseason with them. I was playing games as a part of that preseason. And then it sort of, I mean, it was public anyway because I was playing, was going to play, but it wasn't being shouted from the rooftops because it's NBL1. It's not the national competition. It was a state competition. It's semi-professional. It's a high level, but it's not something that's super publicized. But it became super publicized after someone made a tweet about it online, and it was a headline and it caught on really quickly, and it really blew up into a bit of a media storm for a few days, which was terrifying. That kind of blew over, but one of the consequences was that I was not allowed to play that year. And so with the publicity around the media and then the story of not playing, but being in a situation where I was going to work towards eligibility and have conversations with the administrators about what that looked like and what I could do, it just coincided with what Hannah and Eliza wanted to tell, the story they wanted to tell. So it was, the perfect storm and good timing. And the year that followed was the documentary, and we set out to tell a story of empowerment and a story that was uplifting and broke down a lot of stigmas around transgender women in sport. And I think it does that quite well. I think it does that really well. And it shows the impact of the debate on an individual. But it sadly also shows that we're not quite there yet in terms of inclusion at that level. So the story follows what that second year looked like, which I wasn't a part of a team anymore. I was let go as part of the roster. I mean, I didn't play the year before, so I understood that from a business and basketball point of view. But it became a very lonely year, and it became a really isolated and depressing experience at times. And a lot of the documentary is capturing that, and a lot of it is also capturing what it looks like for other players or for people who are really familiar and around women's sport. So Tracy Holmes and Ben Brown, for example, you know, they're really insightful. They give a lot of really interesting observations about what they see in women's sport and how they see this issue. So, it's a human story. It's not necessarily the most uplifting one in the world, but it's an important one to tell, to try and bring a bit more humanity back to this dialogue.
So brave of you to say, hey, I want to do this documentary and be followed all this time. And obviously you're filming yourself at times.
Yeah.
There's the lexi cam.
There's
I love the lexi cam.
The lexi cam is sometimes being held not by Lexi and sometimes being held by Lexi. The more emotional ones generally were me setting up her phone. So I was probably a bit naive as to what the documentary process would look like and how I would have to expose myself in all of these different environments to tell the story that we wanted to tell. So I was asked relatively early on, like if things are happening or if you're getting information and you feel, reactive or responding to things, get the camera out, talk out your feelings, and, hopefully we can try and capture some of these experiences and some of these pressure points that someone's going to go through if they go through this. So that's how it started out, like a kind of journal to cope with some of the really frustrating times. And There's a lot of footage left on the cutting room floor in that sense. I mean, I would have
We need the
given them-
director's cut.
Oh my, no we don't. No we don't, because so much of it is just me crashing out.
Yeah, fair.
And a lot of tears, a lot of really dejected and just needing to get out the disappointment and heartbreak at different points throughout the process. And they do keep the moment where I kind of find out I'm not going to play. And that was probably the most heartbreaking and almost panic inducing. That was really horrible. But before that, there was so many different conversations I was having that was just triggering this anxiety and triggering this like, you know, what am I doing here? Like, this is just so much pain and effort to be going through. And I just kind of want it to be over.
Did you feel that the LexiCam was a good tool for self-reflection?
Yeah, LexiCam was a great tool for self-reflection. It was, a lot of the time, it was that first point of contact in processing something and being an outlet, and especially being alone in that second year, being quite isolated. It was, yeah, almost like the nexus for where I would start reflecting and coping with those moments.
Did you watch it back?
All of them.
Yeah.
In the moment I would. Not for a long time, no.
Because you know how people take videos and photos of themselves crying?
Yeah, I'm familiar.
You're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, I've never understood that.
Who would do
but
such a thing?
why do people do that? I'm unsure. At least like you had a good reason in that sense.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it was just a way of getting it out and feeling seen, even though it wasn't necessarily seen. Recording it is something that it makes it physical, or it makes it tangible, and so that's enough to be able to feel heard. Yeah.
Okay, so more crying pics and vids is what I need to be doing.
Thankfully, less crying vids in the documentary, and there will not be any more crying videos in the future.
Released publicly.
Certainly not.
Couldn't make it to LA for Adobe Max? You can register online right now for free and tune into over 60 sessions taught by top creative experts from literally wherever you are in the world. Get super inspired by an incredible lineup of keynotes, find out how you can level up as a young creative with the latest streamlined workflows, and even get a juicy sneak peek into your creative future. Yep, that's a literal peek under the hood at what the Adobe engineers have been so busy working on. So what are you waiting for? Thank you so much to Adobe Max for making this episode of Little Things possible.
There were so many moments where you were really hopeful about this outcome as well, or you were trying to hold on to that hope, and then for so much stalling, for so much bureaucracy, also for you to have to speak and show footage of yourself, and for you to be discussed as like, it felt like quite an othering experience to watch it. And I was like, imagine going through this.
It is an othering experience, and that's one of the things that becomes harder to deal with as time goes on.
Yeah.
So when initially you're put through a process and you're subject to this scrutiny, and there are people talking about your body, and there are people talking about your puberty, and there are people talking about really personal things. And I understand that's part of that process, and I was comfortable with that. And I was very open and upfront about all of those things. But when you're in that situation over an extended period of time, it starts to feel quite dehumanizing.
Yeah.
So I am just this situation, and I am just X numbers or Y numbers or this piece of footage or that piece of footage. And it really, I unfortunately kind of lost myself in that process a bit at different stages. And being in the really isolated situation in the second year and being sort of on the outside of the basketball community, it was compounding on that feeling of just, I am different, and I am being scrutinized because I'm different, and I hate these differences. You know, I'm not. I embrace who I am, and I love being trans, but at the same time, there's often times where I'm like, I wish I wasn't trans.
So I found myself wondering how you did continue on with that for 2 years. I just would love to know your motivations and what kept you motivated for 2 years of bullshit.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to think of then.
Yeah.
The reality is when I was playing and I was a part of so I was playing preseason games. I played in 3 or 4, I think. And I was really unfit, but it was incredibly enjoyable and it was really fun. And I was really ready to just, commit myself to restarting my basketball career. And throughout that whole preseason, being part of that team and being part of that group of girls was one of the happiest times of my life. I felt so included. I felt just like I was normal and playing sports and enjoying it and could really pursue it as a passion like I had always dreamed of when I was younger anyway. So those feelings of just those really, really positive feelings carried me through so much of it because I was told no and I was deemed ineligible, but it was always an ongoing conversation. And so there was all kinds of points in time where we were talking about how to move forward and what kinds of things I could do to gain eligibility. And eventually those conversations I started to feel weren't necessarily with the intention of finding a way to become eligible. It wasn't about creating a pathway where I could play. It was about seeing if it was possible, but also potentially justifying if it wasn't. That's how I felt about it as time went on. So the good feelings is what gave me the hope. Like, it was a really hard time, but I knew if I could get back on the court and be part of the basketball community like that again, that it would be worth it. It would 100% be worth the struggle. And even in the second year when I was just on my own a lot of the time and on the court and doing my workouts, it was enough to just be enjoying basketball in those very, few moments that I was on the court that I knew it was going to be worth it. And only once it started getting to the point where I felt that it wasn't going to be possible to get eligibility and that I wasn't being communicated with in a way that I thought was actually working towards the same outcome, which was how can we get everyone comfortable with this situation. I had played and been a part of a team for a long time. I still firmly believe there was never going to be any problems. So it was really difficult once that started becoming questioning whether or not I was actually going to play and going to be a part of it. And once I got to a point where they said no in that second year and it took them a really long time to give that decision. It was at the end of the season, really. I didn't feel as though there was going to be positive conversations towards the next year, and I just had to step away at that point.
I just wonder whether they were just hoping you would go away because it took them so long to come back to you.
It's one of those what ifs that I, at the time, was spending a lot of time reflecting on.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know what their approach was in full. I can only speak to the interactions I had with them, which were interactions that I found really frustrating and really slow and unnecessarily delayed in that second year. There was a lot of times where I probably did feel as though that was maybe something that I was experiencing. But there's also greater politics beyond them making this decision. But yeah, there was a marked difference between what that first year looked like and how condensed that process was and how short a period of time all of those things were worked through and then reflected on and communicated with me too, compared to the second year where I felt a lot more in the dark. I felt like things weren't moving forward and that conversations weren't being had that just should have been having had with the season coming up. And then once I was ineligible again, I felt as though there was a real stepping away from any kind of engagement with me on the matter. So the communication channel between us really broke down and fell apart, which was disappointing. And I was already probably struggling too much to continue going on, but that was a bit of a last nail in the coffin.
You wrote with Missing Perspectives just recently about you not necessarily liking the label of being an advocate, because obviously that's not your role, but at the same time in you doing this documentary, as you've said with people like Ben, who you were saying, the messages that come through were so striking.
I think, so when I write or say something like that, like I'm not an advocate, it's not necessarily that I don't fulfill the role of that. It's more so that I feel like once someone has the label of advocate, and especially in this space, the opinions that a lot of people are going to approach this environment with come up straight away. Because if I come out and say I'm an advocate and I'm advocating for transgender inclusion in women's sports, that's quite confronting to a lot of people. It raises the opinion to someone really quickly because it's a very polarizing conversation and there's a lot of charged debates surrounding it. And I'm far more interested in talking about what my experience in women's sports looks like and what my experience in youth sports also looks like, and talking about the more nuanced cultural, social, and broader elements that aren't just transgender athletes have this testosterone or that testosterone and women's sports has these numbers and that numbers. There's a time and a place for those conversations. I don't think it needs to dominate the airwaves like it does. And I think there's a lot of conversations around that that are more important to have and more important to listen to. And it's not about advocating for the change that I want, because I understand that other people are going to have opinions. It's about having conversations and not explicitly telling people, you know, I want to break down this stigma or I want to break down this misinformation that maybe you've been exposed to. I think that confronts people and that puts them on the back foot, and people don't necessarily come to conversations with open minds when that happens, and it doesn't need to happen. So I'm happy to just tone it back and just speak to lived experience or speak to things as they are in a nuanced way so as to invite people into the conversation rather than tell them about my point of view.
Would you say there's an element of like show don't tell about some of these conversations that we have in the documentary around trans representation?
Yeah, I think with how charged everything can be for people who maybe haven't met a trans person before or don't have a trans person in their lives in some way, show don't tell is just a bit of a softer touch to invite people to something that they might not have the proper information on. And I wish, it's easy to be like, I wish we lived in a world where inclusion and acceptance and education had already happened, but we don't. And that's fine. So there's a lot of space and time for telling and being quite direct, but I think it gets far too much of the attention at the moment, when showing can be a much nicer way and empathetic way to get people involved.
I also think in the documentary it does that really beautifully, because the burden isn't on you to kind of advocate in that way. You're sharing your lived experience, but then there's other people who are speaking to the broader political context and sharing viewpoints that were really insightful for someone if they're not super across the quote unquote debate of all of this.
Yeah, and it's really I don't need to be the person who's up there saying transgender athletes are XYZ. Yeah. It's quite apparent where I sit in relation to wanting to play and thinking that I can belong and being included. And I don't need to go into the details of my physical status and all of these, numbers that are going to set off different conversations from different points of view. It's more so like there are better ways to approach this conversation as a whole. It doesn't need to be, I don't need to talk about what outcomes are going to change and what outcomes I want, because there's a lot of those conversations happening. It's more about how can we approach these conversations with a bit more dignity and respect. And the funny thing about hoops as well is you can certainly look at it as a piece of advocacy, and I'm sure a lot of people do, and it is, because a lot of those points of views you're talking about from the other people are critical, and they are asking for better behavior. But from my point of view and how I see the documentary as well, it's like I tried to play and I'm not playing. And it was a battle that I fought really hard in, but I lost. So I don't need to be advocating for myself to play anymore. It's not something that I'm really fixated on and lost in. I'm a lot more interested in working on other things that I think people need to see representation for and need to see visibility for. And so I think just being a transgender voice and just being able to have those conversations in an articulate and calm way, I find there's a space for that and that can have a lot of meaningful change with people.
So you did lose that ability to play, which is incredibly hard, and we see the fallout in the documentary and also beyond. There's so many other elements of you and your life, and I'm keen to understand how you moved past that setback to focus on those things.
I think in terms of moving on from the disappointment and the heartbreak, I mean, it was my life for 2 years, and I'm a very all or nothing person. When I commit myself to following a passion and doing what I want to do, it's everything to me. And for better or worse, that ended up being like creating a situation where I was just devastated and really in a low place, in a dark place. So moving on started with just being comfortable with the decision to step away. And the weight that lifted off my shoulders as soon as I did that was pretty immense. And then I traveled overseas for a month.
Yeah, off you popped to Japan.
Yeah,
lovely.
just was out of the situation, didn't need to, and wasn't interested in engaging in a lot of the things that were so stressful and were so disappointing. Wasn't in the bedroom or the house that I was in when all of these really hard times happened. And it was really just like a hard reset on what I wanted to do with my time and how I was feeling and how I wanted to navigate, you know, my time in this world. So that was a profoundly positive experience and made it really easy to start the process of healing and moving on.
Yeah.
And
there is something about like going somewhere else and having a very like hard and fast circuit breaker that does something, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I'm lucky enough that I can travel,
Yeah.
and it's something that I prioritize just because when I go overseas and really experience different cultures and try to immerse myself in them, it broadens the world in a way that
Yeah.
in a positive way makes me feel less important.
Yes.
Like the world does not revolve around me. Me being a basketball player or not is such a minuscule moment in time, and these experiences of seeing the world and seeing different things and taking pictures is something I love to do, and eating a lot of different food, like that kind of broadening how I feel as a part of everything, I find really grounding, and it really pulls back everything into a perspective that's a bit more accepting of the world as it is.
I agree. That is really nice to feel kind of insignificant in moments and understand that the world will keep turning no matter what happens in your specific context. So I do want to talk about toxic positivity, and I want to show you a video that I really feel encapsulates annoying positive people on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Happiness is a choice. Oh, totally. And that you can choose to be happy.
Totally.
And that if you're unhappy, and really for many circumstances in our life, day to day, in work and love and relationships, personal responsibility is the answer, and
Entirely on you.
and a lack thereof is the cause.
Absolutely.
Turn it off.
Yeah, totally. Interesting. The idea of responsibility over emotion and feeling is fascinating. I get what he's coming at. I wonder, like, and I think boiling it down into the grab, that is the sentence where it's like, happiness is a choice. That's essentially the headline they're going with.
Yeah.
You can't choose whether you're happy or not.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's also funny, like it's a profile called The Diary of a CEO.
I know.
It's kind of easy to choose to be happy. And I don't know what their background is, but I'm assuming they're successful.
Yeah.
Passing on
It's one of
advice.
those like motivational podcasts where it's like, yeah, get up at 5, do 20 million different things. You need to be happy. You need to be driven. You need to be successful. These are all the hacks. Have a cold water shower. Also eat only XYZ. Like it's one of those very instructive, what we are anti here at the Little Things Pod.
Yeah.
But it has like so many comments, like hundreds of thousands of likes. Like it's crazy how much these little grabs just like take a hold of people and make people feel so shit about themselves. And is the meaning of life even happiness? I don't know.
So it's funny that there's the response and that there's like what I'm assuming is quite a response that is in agreeance for the majority of it. And it's like, okay, well, is this touting of happiness as a choice, and is this commitment to expressing the personal responsibility of happiness, is this performative? Like, are we just performatively, like if happiness is a choice and you need to choose to be happy on a given day, but you're not really feeling that happy, do you perform happiness for yourself?
Yeah.
And is that going to force a genuine sense of happiness and fulfillment out of you? For me, I don't think it would. Something in the last week or two, actually, and I struggle with this a lot anyway, generally, is like I'm not good at being still. I'm not good at being inactive and not doing something and not feeling happy and having the dopamine hit. So it's not
I think
about
that's
feeling.
the athlete in you, by the way.
Well, yeah, potentially. There's always something to work on.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily need to, if you're not feeling happy, that doesn't necessarily mean you're feeling crappy.
Yeah.
Haha, spitting bars. No, there is a kind of space in between feeling happiness, feeling sadness, feeling different things that is just quite still. And so I think if you why do you need to choose to be happy when you can just choose to be?
Whoa.
Isn't being what all of this is about? I don't know.
See, that's our screen grab. Yeah, I also think the recent obsession with happiness, like if you look at humans throughout all of history, a lot of that time humans' goal was not to be happy. It was actually to survive these like awful different situations. And, so it's a more recent phenomenon that we must all be happy at all times. And that's the purpose of life.
Yeah.
When the purpose of life before was survival. And I don't really know what the purpose of life is in the 21st century, but I think putting it on a fleeting emotion and striving for that at all times is not a good idea. Guys, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about life as a struggle.
Yeah.
And like, we don't need to be critical of the fact that life is a struggle. I mean, life just is a struggle for all of us. And in the animal kingdom, a lot of the time people are like, life is survival still. And life is all these different things. And there's also like, if you want to go with surface level, like happiness is a choice, you can equally go surface level, like, without the other emotions, happiness is meaningless. Like, happiness is only happiness because of when we're not happy.
Yeah, otherwise we don't know what happy is.
Yeah. And if he's talking about choosing to be happy, it's like, if you can choose to be happy, what are you choosing to be happy as opposed to? Because it sounds like you're kind of choosing to be happy through the actions that you are taking in your day, which I'm gathering in that context might be choosing to be really, really proactive about business or something.
Oh, God. I think it's probably more about choosing to be content, I would imagine, or an emotion kind of like a feeling like contentment.
I think on the flip side of like choosing to be happy and content, it's dangerous to suggest that you can choose not to be sad.
Yeah, exactly. Choosing in general is like not the right word.
Well, yeah, you don't want to end up in a situation where you're like, I feel bad and I'm unable to grapple with why I do because I can choose to not be. And it's like, well,
yeah, it puts a lot of onus
on
the individual and not considering different like structural reasons, but also mental health reasons why people feel certain ways.
And it's interesting how interconnected these things are, because if we're talking about control and the locus of control, then yes, like what is the expectation of yourself when these things that you potentially can't control and are out of your control are not positive? And is your response to it going to be critical when it doesn't need to be, and inflict harm to yourself when it doesn't need to? Yeah.
Good vibes only. Do we like that phrase? I see that everywhere. Good vibes only. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't have good vibes.
Yeah, I feel like if it's like, you know, one of those silly ways to cope when you're not actually have any good vibes at all, then
I
I'm
sometimes
fine with
like
the superficiality of it. Like, sometimes things are kind of cute like that, but yeah.
I like depression masked as like good vibes only, like a little bit of a chaotic energy to some of this stuff can be kind of funny.
I think what's interesting is like good vibes only is something I feel opposed to, because I'm someone who'll romanticize the struggle and will almost like try and linger in this aesthetic I've created in my head of life as a struggle. And I think it, you know, is it equally as, you know, is romantic to frame the world like that, but you know.
Do you listen to Lana Del Rey?
I don't.
Oh my God. Okay. I think she'd be a bit of you in that sense in terms of
I get this a lot.
romanticizing. If you like the sad girl beat and like romanticizing the struggle, being a bit of a main character, like I feel like she could be a bit of you.
All goes hand in hand.
The tragedy of life can be kind of fun. We are now at the time, Lex. Do people call you Lex? Can I call you Lex?
Yeah, some people call me Lex. Yeah.
Okay. We're now at the time, Lex, for me to ask you what your little thing is. So what's your little thing?
My little thing is a very little thing that I would do maybe once a week or once a fortnight, and that is painting my nails.
Cute. Show me.
Yeah. I've been put to shame by some people in this room who have incredible nails. But for me...
Not me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I know. I did that especially for you.
Yeah, I have in the past gotten my nails done, but I can't afford that shit.
Yeah.
So I've found that
it's a commitment.
Yeah, it is. And it butchers my nails and, you know.
Yeah.
But the consequence has been that sitting down and doing my nails has become really meditative and calm and forces me to be in that stillness I'm not totally comfortable with. And it's not about being like, yeah, I'm going to self-develop and I'm going to be okay with the stillness I'm in. I'm not really that kind of person. It just is good to sit down, do something that takes care, patience, sit with my hands on a table for 20 minutes and still even have a movie on most of the time.
Yeah.
But not go on my phone or not need to be doing something with my hands. Just being okay, waiting, you know, not wanting to compromise, having pretty nails, doing another coat.
That waiting process though, that's what I don't miss about doing my own nails, because I go get my nails done and it's an expensive life choice. But I do find it really transformative.
Yeah.
But I used to paint my nails a lot and waiting game. And then when you think you've got them and you're like, amazing. And then you go do something and they're ruined and you're like, no.
Yeah. Touch the doorknob wrong. And it's just,
forget it.
But it's almost like, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I probably think about as like a habit and a routine now, but it forces me to take a break. Like I can't even type at the keyboard kind of thing. I can't answer emails. I can't do the things that are very indoctrinated into my day-to-day. And even when I'm not working, you know, still inflicting work upon myself. Like it forces me to stop. But yeah, self-expression for me overall is something that is a real point of self-care. And sometimes that's self-expression that's not gendered or doesn't have an undertone of gendered. It's more of a vibe or more of an aesthetic, and it's also very cathartic as someone who felt like they repressed a lot of their self-expression for a long time. I think as someone who can get quite stuck in self-reflection and criticizing for better or worse who I am and what who I am and what my identity is like, having those things that kind of maybe act as tools to find that in those moments that I'm feeling certain parts of myself is actually quite beneficial. And you're still tempering that with like, I don't need to feel like I'm putting a costume on. It's not about, it's not about masking my insecurity. But it is something that, it's like it's a manifestation of a part of yourself that you've maybe ascribed to a color or a piece of clothing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I have a quote for you.
Mm-hmm.
Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare.
Interesting.
Audre Lorde, an American writer and professor and an intersectional feminist and civil rights activist. Agree? Disagree?
Agree with the caveat, as always.
As always?
I think it might depend on what your relationship to self-expression, self-care, and your relationship to society and politics is. There's a lot of value to self-expression as something that's subversive and something that can raise different feelings towards other people and ask questions of other people that may have political contexts. But I think that's also a personal choice and a matter of intention. And that's where things become a bit more obscured, where it's like, sometimes as a transgender woman, I feel that being wearing something incredibly feminine or going out in public, if I say I have an event on but it's in a public area and I'm really dolled up for it, like I've gone the extra mile and
You're feeling yourself.
Yeah, there's a lot of the time where I feel as though people are responding to me as a political statement. And that's not what it is. But sometimes the transgender experience is just inherently politicized and it's hard to escape that. So I kind of agree. In the sense that it's something that you can be empowered in yourself to do. And when people do it and it is political, there's a strong chance that they're also not going out and telling everyone that it's political. Look at my political self-expression and my political self-care. Like it's all kind of in this grey area of, do we all want to consider self-expression as political, or is that something that we use to obscure more meaningful conversations that belong in very political spaces? I think there's a place for both, to be honest, because self-expression is a massive part of how we all coexist. So, yeah, I agree, I think, generally, because if part of your identity is something that people have politicized, then it's difficult to remove the politics from engaging with it.
Yeah.
But that can be really unfair to people who
just want to
express themselves in a particular way.
Yeah.
That is misrepresented.
Oh, well, thank you, Lexi.
Thank you.
Hey guys, it's Jana, exec producer here. So, like Lexi suggested, we broke this chat into 2 parts because Lexi had so many insightful things to share on resilience and her story. Go listen to part 2 on your podcast feeds everywhere right now to hear her and Alice chat on the 3 supposed secrets of resilience. Thanks to Adobe Max for making this episode of Little Things possible. Search Adobe Max online right now for more info on the lineup. It all kicks off today.